All right, here we go. Look at me now, Granny. I record my lectures. I post them on. No, I learned what email was. I'm uh I'm all I'm all tech now. All right, first of all, happy Veterans Day. Do we have any veterans here? Outstanding. Thank you. But what branch? National Guard. National Guard. Outstanding. What about what branch? National Guard. What about any family members? Y'all have immediate family that in the military? What branch? Air Force and Army, in the Navy. That's most of my family. My grandpa was in the Navy for World War II. My brother-in-law, my nephew is in the Navy. So I was fishing until I got a Navy answer. Uh, but we're all part of the same team. So happy Veterans Day. Also, did you guys get my email? Hunter Sims is offering tutoring. He's on the football team, but he's in graduate school in KNES, and he did real well at 310 and 415. So I know Sarah is available to help, but her hours are limited. So this would just be another option in case you guys wanted to find some extra help. Lee Hall used to have some tutoring available, but Sydney graduated, so they don't have any 310 or 415 tutors. So. All right, you guys, the plan for today. I posted the shoulder muscles and the PowerPoints. However, shoulders are freaky complex, okay? Shoulders crazy. So what I think I'm gonna do is go back and review the shoulder girdle complex. Because remember, guys, I still have students, and it's no fault of yours. I blame ESPN that still think this is shoulder extension, all right? Remember that? Like shoulder extension, people think it's extension, but that's flexion, right? Because ESPN keeps saying full extension. So if we aren't clear about the basic motions, then it's going to throw off trying to establish agonist and then trying to look at muscles and how do I stretch it. And so we just really need to make sure. And then remember from 310 how the scapula helps our functional circle. Like the analogy that I try to use in 310 is if my clock hand is my arm, my shoulder doesn't bring me to 12 o'clock. My shoulder brings me to about 10 o'clock, and my scapula helps bring me to 12 o'clock. You remember that? So we have to kind of make sure we understand that all of this isn't just shoulder. Our scapula helps to another way to look at it too. I use the T-Rex analogy that if all you did was flex your shoulders, you only get this far. Your scapula gives you all of this extra motion. Right? So if we're going to talk about muscles of the scapula and muscles of the shoulder, we kind of have to remember those functions. Pelvis is not as bad because the pelvis is connected. I can't independently move it. It'd be like shucking an oyster if I move my right pelvis from my left pelvis. Right? That's not a good day. But my scapula is like an independently moving pelvis. It has muscles that independently. Okay. So this is from 310. If you took 310 long time ago and don't have this saved, just give me a heads up. I'll be happy to post it on our page, okay? But our shoulder girdle, we have a pelvic girdle, left and right iliums, ischiums, pubis, articulating on the trunk through the sacroiliac joint and the pubic symphysis. But again, it's not a big deal because they kind of all work together. Here we have to separate them because my right and left side can work independently of each other. Your sternoclavicular joint, where your collarbone attaches to your sternum. So all of this scapula stuff is happening really here. This is the true articulation from your upper extremity to your thorax. And then your collarbone connects to your scapula at the acromioclavicular joint, your AC joint. And then we have the scapula-thoracic articulation. Apple, banana, strawberry, sledgehammer. Sternoclavicular joint, acromioclavicular joint, glenohumeral joint, scapula-thoracic articulation. So that's literally just how your scapula floats and orbits your ribs. So it's not necessarily a true, it's bone moving about bone, but it's not like there's not a synovium. It's held together with negative pressure and muscles, and heck, you even have muscles that run in between them. I like to look at it as deli meat when we talk about subscapularis and some other muscles. But we talk about scapular motion because that flat bone of the scapula is where a lot of muscles are yanking and pulling off of. So that's why we say like scapula elevation, scapula depression, protraction, retraction. It's that scapulothoracic articulation, just because it's attached to the collarbone is going to go along for the ride. Because it's attached to the collarbone is going to go along. So our motions, when we get into the scapula, is going to be about scapulothoracic articulations. Elevation pullers, depression pullers, protraction pullers, retraction pullers, upward rotation pullers, and downward rotation pullers. At the glenohumeral joint, that's your shoulder joint. The glenoid fossa is just the socket. Glenohumeral joint is your shoulder joint. Flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, internal, external rotation, and then obviously we have the variation of ab and ad that we call horizontal ab. Sounds silly, but again, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Shoulder flexion gets you more in the fetal. Remember, flexion gets you in the fetal at all the joints. That's what they have in common. To get in the fetal position, we're going to take the sagittal road. We're going to get into a ball. The frontal road doesn't get me into a ball. Look out! Out! Frontal plane isn't going to help get me into fetal. Transverse plane isn't going to help me fetal. You know? Heads up! Look out! Sagittal road. So this contribution, shoulder flexion, helps get me in the fetal. Okay. The way I like to now teach ab and adduction is sometimes things change their names over time. Example, people used to call this lateral flexion, but of course, flexion's already established for sagittal, so then the verbiage kind of became lateral bending or swaying. But ab and adduction used to be called lateral flexion. Because if you think about it, I'm getting eventually to the same place, whether I take the sagittal road or whether I take the frontal road, I'm getting into fetal. So ab is getting more into fetal through a different road, through our frontal road, and ad gets me further away from fetal in a different road, in a frontal road. Okay? We talked about clock hands and ab, and I also remind you from 310 that whoever named ab and adduction had to be Satan because they sound so close. At least flexion and extension start with different letters. I mean, ab and adduction, that's just evil. So that's why I'll say things like AB, AD, it's just so easy when we're going to get into the muscles to be like, this muscle's an abductor, this muscle's an adductor. They sound so close. Does that make sense? And I don't want you to miss a function or something because of similarity. I think I mentioned this in 310. I usually try to tell this story. I graduated with a set of twins, but they were not identical twins. They didn't look alike, but their names were Heath and Keith. And so until you really knew them, people would mistake in their names, not because they looked the same, but because their names were so close. And that's what ab and adduction is. It's just they sound so close that it's easy to miss them. You may know that this is this and that's that, but you may confuse ab and ad. Okay? Right. Let's look at our circles. Already posted to the old Moodler. Class. It's a lot. What do we remember though about especially balls and sockets? You have the most options of motion. Those are the triaxials. So it makes sense you're going to have more muscles that pull in more directions of motion. In addition, we also know muscles' purpose isn't just to influence motion, stability. And one of the reasons you have all these hip muscles, yeah, it's to get you to move around, but it's also to make sure you don't dislocate your hip because that's a bad day. And it's very similar here. In fact, it's even more important here because we actually trade off some natural stability. We have less of a deep socket. We have a very shallow socket so that we can move more. In the hip, we have a big, powerful ligament inside our hip called the teres ligament. We don't have that in the shoulder because we need to move more. And so a lot of these muscles, yes, influence motion, but they also have that secondary. When we get into the rotator cuff, it's important to try to maintain that golf ball on that golf tee for joint stability. Okay. Here's the trade-off. There's a lot of stuff going on. But one of the reasons I try to save this for last is we have now enough practice. Can you imagine if we let off of this, right? So it's going to follow the same rules. It's an anterior, posterior. This is a right shoulder. So if I was laying down, this would be KNES right shoulder, which is somewhat circular. The reason we don't do it here is because you couldn't see it. I have to rotate it on the board so that we could see it. But if you look at if you have a tablet and it's laying on your desk, it literally is what it would look like if you were just standing up. That's the anterior part of your shoulder, the posterior, the lateral, the medial. We're going to have flexion pullers, flexors. We're going to have extension pullers. We're going to have abduction pullers. We're going to have adduction pullers. We're going to have medial or internal rotator spinners, and we're going to have lateral or external rotation spinners. Try this technique for, if you're wondering what this is, this red circle means this is one muscle. Remember how we had, well, you already know this, upper chest, clavicular fibers. So we had the anterior fibers of the gluteus medius, right? We have different fibers on these fan-shaped muscles. So this was my method of trying to say, hey, this is muscle. But the anterior fibers cross this anterior and the posterior fibers cross posterior. So it was a way to basically say that not all of these things are sitting with this, if that makes sense. It was my way of trying to compromise to say this is all one muscle, but these fibers cross anterior, these fibers cross posterior, these fibers are trying to spin you this way, these fibers are trying to spin you that way. We'll get into that. I'm just trying to break down the lane of the circle for you guys, the big class. This is like a 5A class. We had precedence with these, with the hip, right? The muscles that were just like me. I didn't care about school. I just wanted to go play in recess and PE. These are just ones that can't wait to go outside and spin and play on the merry-go-round. Rotator, rotator, rotator cuff, rotator, rotator, rotator. That's the fourth one. We're going to go into that in detail. Okay. Now, what I'm going to allow us to do, I wanted to accomplish a few things today. One is to make sure we don't have any questions about shoulder motion, flexion, extension, ab, add, internal, external. To let you know that this is probably one of our more challenging circles, but guess what? We got like, what, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Our last test. Our last test is like December something. After this, all we got is scapula. And honestly, I think the scapula is like the easiest one. So we're gonna, little bites, little bites, little bites, little bites. Do this. Let's talk agonistic group. Does she need internal rotation pullers or external rotation pullers? External rotators. That's great. And so what we're going to do once we adapt the circles or your lists or however you want to do it is just say, well, who are the external rotation? And I'm going to teach you infraspinatus, teres minor, posterior fibers of your deltoid. So again, the actual pullers should be kind of the last of the process. Because if you don't follow the process, that's when we make mistakes. I could totally see somebody, what if I start here and I do this? And I could see someone who doesn't know how to identify agonists saying, well, you internally rotated, must be the internal rotator. Sense? So from here to there, 1 to 2, external rotators concentric. From 2 to 1, external rotators eccentric. Same muscles. Okay, how about this one? Let's do one of the 310 questions. Is that the right or the left that he's working? His right. Yeah, we analyze motion from their perspective. I know this is some review stuff, but it's important. I think sometimes if we don't review, we fell for the same similar traps. When you were in biology lab and you had to identify bones and you had to identify the sides of the bone, they would give you like one humerus and say, is this a right or a left? And it wasn't your right or your left. It was literally the same bone is on everybody's right side. So if this is your right humerus, then it would make sense. This is your right shoulder. So right shoulder. I brought this one up because a lot of 310 students were confusing shoulder rotation when your elbows flex with horizontal AB and adduction. I thought that was fascinating. So horizontal AB and adduction is literally when your shoulder joint is in your trunk's transverse plane. Here, your shoulder joint is still in its, not the trunk's transverse, but its transverse. If you remember from 310, it's from the long bones perspective. In other words, internal, external, internal, external, internal, external, internal, external, internal. It's all the same spin. The log is spinning the same way. If this was a log spinning on the water, okay? So this is here to there, that's external rotation, there's internal rotation. Let's establish agonist. The TheraBand or the exercise is trying to internally rotate me. So I would need external rotation pullers. I would need right shoulder external rotators. If I see external rotation, it's going to happen concentrically. And if I observe internal rotation, it's going to happen eccentrically. All we have to do is just establish who are those poles. That's it. All right, let's try a different one. Let's do reverse engineer it. What if I asked you to identify the eccentric phase of this exercise? We go left to right or we go right to left? Right to left. And we can say it in a sentence. flexors, shoulder flexion pullers are going to be responsible for that extension through eccentric contraction. You don't want to use hip extensors right there. If the dumbbells, which are trying to extend you, work with muscles that are trying to extend you, you would have two teams playing tug of war on the same side of the rope with no team on the other side, and they would sling the rope across. So if gravity is trying to do one thing to you, you need to recruit muscles that are pulling in the other direction. Not that there's not exception. If there's a mosquito on your arm, I'm sure you don't want to do this. But when you have dumbbells in your hand and you see a mosquito on your arm, I'm sure you're not going to do that. Make sense? Shoulder flexors. Who are the shoulder flexors? We're about to learn. Starting Wednesday. They're muscles that pull in the direction of shoulder flexion pullers. When I see shoulder flexion and the shoulder flexors are working, got to be concentric contraction. When the shoulder flexors are my agonists and I see extensions, got to be eccentric contraction. And if I'm working isometrically, like in the picture of the right, it's got to be isometric. Now, when the dumbbells are down here, gravity isn't trying to cause shoulder motion, but gravity is trying to dislocate my shoulder. If you think about it, gravity's trying to do this. Make sense? So when you pick up dumbbells, especially if you pick up heavy dumbbells, you feel the muscles in your arms contract. Because muscles don't just influence motion, they try to maintain joint stability. So maybe it really is a shoulder shrug. I'm not joking. Scapula, you know that. All right, let's do some more. All right, let's set up some parameters here. Let's go frontal plane. And let's analyze agonists at the shoulder. Let's also analyze agonists at the scapula. Let's analyze some agonists at the elbow. Give it some thought. A common mistake on 310 and 415 is that if I go right to left, I'll have students say, well, isn't that a shoulder press motion? And I'll be like, absolutely, but it doesn't mean it's a shoulder press. Because we don't associate muscles with specific motions without the context of contraction. For a shoulder press, the dumbbells are trying to make your arms go down. This exercise is trying to bring your arms up. Totally different purpose for the exercise, right? So we can't just say that's a press movement. We have to take into a context what the exercise or the machine is actually trying to do to us so that we can see who we need to do a job against. Okay? So again, give that some thought. Let's look at agonists and the shoulders, scapula, and shoulders, again, frontal. I know there's going to be a lot of times combination stuff, but that's why we talk about planes and axes. So frontal contribution, scapula, elbow, and then you know that you're going to be using the same muscles in the exercise going up or going down. So then it's, well, which one is concentric, which one is eccentric? Elbow, do I need flexors or extensors? Do I need flexion pullers or extension pullers? Was that? Flexion. Yeah, you need flexion pullers, right? Because the exercise is trying to extend them. True. The exercise is trying to extend my elbow, so I don't need extensors. I need flexors. Who are the flexors? The main ones: brachialis, biceps brachii, brachioradialis. Shoulder, do I need abductors or adductors? Adductors, yeah. The machine's trying to abduct me. I need adduction pullers, and we'll learn on our circles. Latissimus dorsi, teres major. We're going to talk about the posterior fibers of the deltoid if you're in a certain position, switching function. So we're going to go into those conversations. Triceps brachii long head is an adduction puller too. Okay, scapular. Do we need upward rotators or downward rotators? Downward rotators. Absolutely. I won't even get into those because we're not on scapula yet, but it's still the same concepts that we had from 310. Would you need elevation pullers or depression pullers to help get it all the way down? Depressors, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So would the concentric phase of all these different agonistic groups be from left to right or right to left? Concentric phase. Left to right, absolutely. And then the eccentrics is going to be right to left. And it's not that we're guessing, it follows the sentence. Flexors are going to be doing flexion through concentrics. Flexors are still going to be working, but they're going to allow the extension through eccentrics. Adductors at the shoulder are going to do adduction through concentrics. And the same muscles, the adductors, are going to do abduction through eccentrics. Downward rotators are going to do downward rotation through concentrics. And downward rotators are going to allow the upward rotation through eccentric. Depressors are going to do depression through concentrics. Depressors are going to do the elevator. Now again, that's not all the time. It's just for this exercise. Because that's what the machine is trying to do to you. The machine wants to do all those motions to you. So if the machine wants to take all those joints this way, you have to have muscles that are trying to take your joints the other way. And they can either make it happen, prevent it from happening, or let it happen in the other direction. Same muscles, different contraction. Is this helpful? Yeah. Let's do another. This is obviously what it would look like if I did it, but you know, I'm very humble, so I would never still though. Let's see if I can find the before and after here. Stop doing this exercise this way. Do it our way. Add, sometimes adding keywords is so. There's a good little before and after. Let's try this one. Aha. Look at it a different way. Okay, she's holding this position. And so we know that there are some isometrics involved because gravity's trying to do some stuff. Okay. So let's establish what is gravity, the external forces, trying to do to her shoulders. What is it trying to do to her elbow? What is it trying to do to her scapula? In other words, if she just turned off all of her muscles, what would happen? Turned off all the muscles except the gripping ones. Okay? Except the finger play. So let's play that game. What agonistic group at the shoulder, elbow, scapula are maintaining this position? Identify those muscles, and then we'll play some motion. Okay? Then I'll tell you, hey, she brings the dumbbell up to that position, what type of contraction must happen? Or she lowers the dumbbell down from that position, what type of contraction? So we'll play that game out. Let's identify shoulder agonist, elbow agonist, and scapula agonist. For bonus practice, give me the scapula agonist at her left arm to hold that position for bonus funsies. Left arm, do you think she needs protractors or retractors? Absolutely. The bench is trying to retract it, right? So she's going to be using protractors to maintain that position. Okay. Now, again, we didn't get to scapula yet, but we can still practice. What are things trying to do to us? Right shoulder. Do I need shoulder flexors or shoulder extensors? What's the dumbbell trying to do to me? Okay, guys, let me try again. At her right shoulder, if I'm asking about the agonist, who do I need to hold that position? Do I need flexion pullers or extension pullers? Extension pullers. We call them extensors. Right shoulder extensors. Those are going to be all the muscles that cross posteriorly. The posterior crossing muscles. So if you look at your circle, you could be, oh, okay, that's all the ones that are going to be crossing posteriorly. We'll get into who they are. But do you see how from our application, it's one thing to learn the rules of a game, but just because I memorized the whole rule book of basketball doesn't mean I know how to play basketball. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's important for us to know the rules, but to practice it and to play it is even more important. Imagine someone learning all the rules. They know everything about softball, but then stepping up to the plate and trying to hit a pitch. I mean, you've got to play. Okay. Elbow, do I need flexors or extensors? Good. Those you should be able to know by now, right? This. Okay. If she lowers the dumbbell down, in other words, I don't give you a specific motion, I give you a specific function, not function, but like a practical explanation. She lowers the dumbbell down. You know darn well she's not going to push it down. So she lowers the dumbbell down, still working my shoulder extensors, but the motion that I'm going to see when that happens is shoulder flexion. Extensors do flexion through eccentrics. Cool. If she lowers the dumbbell down, I'm going to see elbow extension. Flexors do extension through eccentrics. Now let's do scapula. For this one, we're really looking at probably retraction and protraction, right? The upward and downward is really important but in this position, really the retraction and protraction is going to help get the dumbbell higher or lower. Does that make sense? The upward or downward rotation, think of it like this, the upward and downward rotation, my scapula is in a different plane than the movement of lifting up and lowering down the dumbbell. So really it's about retractors or protractors. Which one would she need at her right scapula? Thought experiment. She turns off all the muscles on her arm and this falls down. What motion is that going to cause at her scapula? Protraction. So she needs retractions. She needs retractors. Retractor pulls. Scapular retractors. She lowers it down. The retractors are going to allow protraction through eccentrics. When she brings it back up, retractors are going to do retraction through concentrics. One of the cool, so if she has her arm, let's see if I can find a picture of a starting position. This would be a fun conversation. I hope they think of it. So don't pay any attention to any of the red stuff. When her arm is straight, really the only thing gravity is trying to do outside of dislocate her shoulder is trying to protract her scapula. Does that make any kind of sense? Almost kind of like if you were standing up and you held dumbbells, gravity's not trying to do any of this, but it's trying to retract the scapula. So that's why, like, one of the ways that these bent over rows get initiated usually is with the scapular retraction first, so that you could kind of get some inertia going, you could get some mass in motion going, then you could transfer that force into the shoulder stuff. So next time you're doing these, concentrate on just retracting first. Use inertia twice, retract first, and then just use the muscles at the shoulder and the elbow to get it going again. You see, like, oh, that's a big difference. All right. Concentric, eccentric. Cool. Are we getting the hang of proving contractions and not just having to guess on contractions? Is it really are proven? If we know the agonists and we know the motions, then the contraction is solved. Agonist at the shoulders. Where's my concentric phase? Where's my eccentric phase? And for practical giggles, what muscles at the elbow are most likely recruited as an agonist isometrically to help me maintain rigidity of my arm as I'm moving the ball of my shoulder? Again, I've said this in 310. The crazy thing is your body, like, instinctively knows all this stuff. Like, you know, if you got into that exercise, what muscles to recruit. I just need to get your consciousness to communicate what your body already knows, what your instincts already know. Think of it like this. Sometimes great players don't necessarily make great coaches. Sometimes they do. Sometimes not great players make great coaches. How to coach it, how to communicate, how to understand it for what we want to do is a lot more important than you just being able to go over it. Does that make sense? That's why, like, sometimes some students struggle, not because they don't know the stuff, but they just know how to play. They don't know how to coach. They don't know how to explain. They don't know how to. Let's go from left to right. Am I using the same muscles that I used when I was doing my straight arm raises, you know, with the dumbbells? Different muscles, same motion. But in the dumbbells, gravity was trying to extend me. In this exercise, gravity is trying to flex me. I don't need flexion pullers. Sling the bar up. I need extensors, shoulder extensors. Wednesday, we'll start to learn who those are. They're going to be the posterior crossing shoulder muscles. Shoulder extensors are going to allow the flexion through eccentrics. Same extensors are going to make the extension happen through concentrics. What about at my elbow? Do I need extensors or flexors to help maintain that rigid link as I'm going down? My extensors, right? Yeah, because the bar is trying to flex me. In fact, I think that's why a lot of times people give credit to the tricep when you're doing kind of like some external shoulder stuff, because when you're doing like straight arm stuff, you feel it in your tricep. But a lot of time that's just that muscle preventing the elbow from flexing while you're trying to create a rigid, rigid link at the arm. All right, so I hope this was helpful. You have the information that I posted this morning. That's why I wanted to do this, because I didn't think to give it to you over the weekend. And students really like to get a heads up. That's on me. And so starting on Wednesday, we'll go through the functions. We'll go through the individual muscles. And we'll try to take our time, because the shoulder is a little crazy. All right? Y'all have a good one.